Quality matters. Benjamin Franklin once quipped, "The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten." Quality Matters is here to talk about all things quality. So whether you're looking to improve your business, getting ready for an audit, or dealing with failed inspections, tune in, check us out, then get back to doing work that matters.
You're in Houston, is it?
Oh, no, it's in California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he's going to go over there tomorrow.
What part of California?
San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Vista. Well, the baby's in La Jolla.
Oh, yeah, I know La Jolla. I was in the
used to
Navy.
work over there. We used to live over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I used to live in El Cajon.
And where?
El Cajon.
Oh, yep,
Near-
me too. Did that.
About
Did
by San
Santee.
Yeah.
What else? Yeah, just pretty much Santee and El Cajon.
Nice.
That's where I lived over there. Yeah.
Yeah, you used to live right by the university, actually. So, yeah.
All right. We're live, folks.
All right.
So, hey, everyone. I want to welcome you to our first Quality Matters Presents live stream. So this is definitely something new for us. We actually kind of had to take a minute here just to make sure all the sound was working properly. But very glad to have everyone that's watching online, have folks here. So we're going to be talking today about quality management as it relates to small business. The short version is that while the world has changed dramatically over the last 12 months, I really believe that it is a gold mine for small businesses. It's an opportunity that just doesn't come around very often. So we want to talk about some of the ways that through integration of quality management principles, some of the changes in technology and how we work are impacting the workplace, really how small business can succeed in this environment today. But before we go too much further, I want to say, of course, special thanks. We are here at Fogo de Chao, so going to be enjoying some good food here in just a little bit. But first, also want to thank Sean with Oil and Gas Global Network, Mark LeCour for helping us with some of the lighting, camera, sound equipment. And so Sean is going to be one of our panelists. I'm, of course, Kyle Chambers with Texas Quality Assurance. We have Melissa Bastnight with Titronics Medical, and Caleb Adcock, who is also with us at Texas Quality Assurance. So, Sean, you want to get started on telling us a little bit about your background, kind of, what you bring to the table here?
Sure. So about 18 years in oil and gas. I spent most of that time with Schlumberger. I've worked manufacturing, both as a technician and as a manufacturing engineer. Sales, business development, marketing, through those different areas. I worked for machine shops. I've worked for various companies throughout that supply to oil and gas companies service companies like Halliburton and Schlumberger and people like that who became my customers. And then spent the last, going on almost a year now, working with the Oil and Gas Global Network as a podcast host and working with them internally, where I host a podcast that you and your wife have been on.
Yep, it was a lot of fun.
As a guest, yes, we're focused on the ESG and the energy evolution. So a bit in that crux
Real
of
parallel path.
What do we do? What are we doing going forward, and what does the future look like, and how we're going to get there? So yeah.
Perfect. So Melissa, tell us a little bit about you, kind of what you bring to the table.
So I've been in medical device and pharmaceuticals for the last 25 or so years, and from very small companies, 16 people, to very large companies like Abbott Laboratories with thousands of people. So just in the quality and regulatory realm, all over, actually.
And Caleb, how about you?
With Texas Quality Assurance with Kyle over here. I predominantly have an inspection background, structural steel, welding. I've inspected soil, concrete, so pretty much that's my deal as a field technician. So.
A little bit all over the place, and I think that's what's really great about this world of quality management. It's the number one thing I love about my job is the vast variety of people and the work that you run across. There's really no limit. So we're going to be talking about the same principles here. Again, if we're talking about structural steel and soil inspections to medical device software and sales marketing in the oil and gas world, it's the same principles that apply. So let's start first by talking a little briefly about some of the challenges that, we know that we've seen in the last year. I don't want to belabor it because everyone talks about this a lot, but there's some key challenges that everyone has seen in the last year. So, Melissa, what are some of the things you've seen here in the last 12 months that have really caused organizations to struggle, whether internally or externally?
I think it's just trying to, how are we going to work remotely? Well, the industry I work in now is a software development company, so they're always been able to work remotely. But I know that other companies, that's not their norm. So now everybody's trying to, be able to chat with everybody, still do product development, still all of those things. So what we're doing now is everything's through Teams. So we're talking about all the projects that we're on, talking to our customers, clients, and trying to figure out what do they need, writing our requirements, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's a little more challenging because it's not, you can just pick up a phone or go, visit them or anything, right? So now it's, we're all talking just to get the group together is talking on Teams. So that makes it a little more challenging, especially when you're in different time zones and things like that. It makes it a little rough.
Definitely that time zone one. That one is still real tricky for me. I never can't quite get it right. No telling how many times I'm going to go to Google to see what time it is somewhere. Yes. How about Sean? What have you seen? Not just the changes last year, but specifically with the oil and gas industry and the no shortage of other industries connected to it.
Yes, it's that synergistic aspect that we all relate to each other, which is part of that evolution, I think, as well, is recognizing that. I think that's it's easy to pick on the pandemic, and it's easy to bring forth something that we just talked about a minute ago around ESG. I think those are softballs. But I think to go forward and kind of go back to that is recognizing that we are synergistic. I think that's one of the big lessons that's out there, but it's more of a tertiary thing that I think is going to have a lasting impact as we start to see how we are in the same boat. Regardless, we do silo. We even silo within the oil and gas industry. We silo. I mean, my wife's in the medical field, but not really. But she's siloed, and so it's these things where I think it's really recognizing that comprehensive aspect and how we all are impacting each other and why that's important is one of the big things for this year.
Well, I talk all the time when we talk about this idea of process mapping is every process has an integration from another into another, that there really is no such thing as a completely isolated process. And, that's one of the things that I'm finding very exciting about right now is, we had tried at Texas Quality Assurance, we tried to do remote audits here a few years ago, and we couldn't do a remote audit to save our lives. No one wanted to do a remote audit. It was such an odd foreign concept to us. But now these things are commonplace. It is absolutely nothing to integrate technology into these normal kind of everyday events. So it's just a huge opportunity. You have to forgive Caleb. He is doing our tech on the back end to make sure that we've got everything running up here.
Looking for comments as well on YouTube and LinkedIn. So if anybody's got those, we'll see them.
So Caleb, how about you? What are some of the things that you've seen the last 12 months that folks really struggled to overcome?
I think uncertainty probably would be the biggest thing. I remember when this first happened, nobody knew what was going on, how to act. I mean, even to this day, people still don't. There's no sort of standardization for the way people do business. Everybody you talk to has got a different idea about what's the normal. And I definitely think it's getting better, but I think in the future, people are going to have to sit down and address those issues within their companies. Like, what are the inputs and how can we react to those inputs as far as standardization with the new, the new way of everything. So.
No, I completely agree. There's so much that can be documented that ought to be. There's so much that can be documented that maybe not ought to be. I think one of the most common fears that I hear folks when we talk about ISO 9001 or some other quality management standard is you're immediately afraid that they're going to get tied down and locked down to doing business one way, and it's going to be so rigid that they can't deviate from it. But a properly functioning quality management system, that's not the case at all. I mean, we were talking about that on a podcast episode recently. So tell us a little bit about, what are some key things that folks need to look at when they're writing some of these process procedures and documenting some of these requirements? How deep should they go into it? How much time they need to spend on it?
Yeah, well, we just went through that, trying to figure out how we're going to, everyone now doing remote and working through the IT systems and all that and what we're going to use. And, so that was a whole other process that had to be written. But yeah, just going through your whole quality system is looking through the process and what can you do. And yeah, if you it's a continual process improvement. So whatever you see and any issues you may have, then you can change it based on what your situation that you're seeing.
Yeah, I think that's something that people miss far too often. Say, if you document a process and you get something set, that doesn't mean it's chisels in stone. I mean, it is a fairly simple reapproval process. We found a new way that works. We move forward with it. A simple thing that we encountered very early on is we communicate with teams internally all the time. Caleb's on the north side of Houston, I'm on the south. We'll probably be on Teams 4 or 5 times in the day. But we had to very quickly put a rule in there that we're not going to communicate with our customers over Teams because it's just too hard to maintain that communication and you kind of lose things in there. So it's little things like that folks really have to be good about saying, no, this is simply our policy of how we're going to operate moving forward, which I think is something that the world hasn't had to do since the tech boom in the late 80s and through the 90s. No one's really had to say we have to do business differently than before. What you got there?
I think it's paramount to figure out what that's going to look like going forward, and I think it's the uncertainty that Caleb talked about is the X factor, because we all know that it's not going to be getting back to where we were before. It's almost like a post 9/11 feeling of an event that has completely restructured the way that we look at. And that was very niche around travel, I would say, right. And some relative security outside of that. But this is holistic.
It is,
right. And then we're going to have this. And I think there's a big part of it that needs to be looked at, and that's the human side, which is that we have this release coming, where people are going to want to go and connect. They're going to want to drive across town. They're going to want to go to Fogo de Chao,
right?
I'll come sit in a chair and talk, and so when that happens up against metrics like cost, and then I think there's still going to be a susceptibility to risk. That can a company look at it and say, whether it's a small or big, if I do something and it causes an issue,
right?
The residual benefit, is it a detractor if I do a spreader event, or if I'm not being considerate about other people and not managing that properly? What does that look like?
No, I agree. I totally agree. And it's so much easier to keep track of now because it's not. When I first started in the quality management world, I was thrown into the library, which was an office about this size, full of hundreds of binders. And I was told to go through and sort through it and make sense of what was in the library. Well, now with document management systems, which are so readily available, it's something that we offer through Texas Quality Assurance as well, is you can find the one document you're looking for from hundreds in a few clicks with a proper document management system. So integrating some of these much more readily available information technology tools, it's going to allow small companies to do what previously 10 years ago only multi-billion-dollar organizations generally had access to do. So Caleb, you were talking about uncertainty. Tell us kind of a little bit about, what you see with small businesses out there and, the fears that they're having.
I think, obviously trial and error is a big part of it. And I think, as long as people are learning and not getting frustrated and giving up, I think that's really the way to power through it.
I think that's a good point though, and that's something that I want to get out of this is I truly believe is a lot of hope. There's a lot of good that can come specifically for a small business. I think the opportunities for the larger businesses are, dwindled in comparison to what I see for small business. I know that's hard to believe and hard to hear when you see that, 30% of the small businesses in the country right now have either failed or in the process of failing. And what we kind of called it early on in this whole process is once we saw that the 15 days to slow the spread was going to turn into more, however much more is still yet to be determined. And we said that folks are going to fall in one of two camps. They're going to fall in the camp of we're just going to struggle, we're going to hunker down, maybe we'll make it, maybe we don't. But they're only going to be a fraction of what they were when things recover. The other group is saying, all right, we now have a lot more time on our hands. We've got a lot of opportunity to make some improvement. And those teams that are able to jump on that are really going to be the ones that thrive.
Yeah, I think you have more time now to go through your systems and say, does this make sense? Where can we improve? What can we do about it? And of course, there's lots of webinars and things out there, and just learning what's happening, what's my better way to do the same processes, and really look at them.
No, I totally agree. World that Kayla comes from, contract labor is abundant. When you're talking about, structural steel and these type words, contract labor is so abundant. It's just kind of the norm. You know, we've got one client right now. They're like, well, we only have 10 employees, but when it gets busy, we might have 50 people on payroll. You know, but they're contractors, and I think that's an idea that now has an opportunity to expand beyond skilled labor. You know, it's been a common thing for big business to have, you know, fractional management for their executive and C-suites, but there's no shortage of folks out of work looking for opportunities to do better. And I'm not saying that they're out of work is a good thing, but I'm saying that it is an opportunity for a lot of people to do a lot of good that they couldn't have done before.
Well, I think the word, if you're playing the bingo at home, you can take this off your list, but pivot is a word that I keep thinking about. And really what that means, I think where a small business is more nimble and be able to do this. If you have, I can remember, not to pick on anybody I've worked for that's big, but you can draw the lines to get that, I used to call it the elephant, to get it to turn around to forever, right? In almost any way, whether it's adopting even something as simple as a quality process or just an engineer or some sort of operational process.
You can get 4 people to change the way they operate a lot easier than 40 or 400. It becomes a scale issue. So I think that's going to provide a lot of opportunity. There's just no shortage of good professionals out there who are looking for opportunities that might not have had them before. And, you know, to hire a full-time quality manager or to hire a full-time, you know, weld inspector, you know, Caleb, how much could a full-time weld inspector expect to make in a year?
Full-time, I mean, depending on, you know, certifications, you're looking at paying them between, you know, it's a big range, but $30,000 and $90,000, you know, $100,000. So, and
then by the time you had benefits and vacation, you're looking at $100,000 cost. But if you're a small company with only 20 or 30 people, can you give that guy full-time work?
You usually hire somebody else. So
and so these are a lot of just opportunities where you can take those folks that have the skills that you need, and you can get them when you need them, as you need them. And, you know, the whole idea of the gig economy hit the IT world, you know, 15, 20 years ago. You know, we've all been familiar with the gig economy for IT, but I think we're going to see an opening for that in other professional services outside of, you know, folks looking to code and do web design.
Well, information, you know, is now, the world is a lot smaller place because of technology. So information is dynamic, you know, so people know where they need people know where they can go, you know, it's very dynamic because information is at, you know, your fingertips. So I think that there is going to be even more, just lots of movement between, you know, people and professions and companies. So.
Well, we've even seen here that for the ease of providing consultation, document information development service, auditing, it's so much easier for consulting companies like us now than it was just a few years ago. So we're able to provide the same service at a lower rate and get it done faster for you as a result of everything that's happened in the last year. So, Melissa, you've been in a number of different organizations. What are some of the benefits you see of a small business that has a management system in place and that doesn't? If they've actually got that certification, that seal they can stick on their website.
Well, yeah, it depends on the size of the company, but having one on site would help, you know, look through all the processes and audit what's going on and, you know, be there for any manufacturing, CAPAs, complaints, you know, non-conformances, things like that. They're there and they can see the process and react to it quicker. And see what's happening. If you know what's going on, then you can figure out a root cause and all that easier than what you can if you're coming in from the outside and not really even knowing the process whatsoever.
And so with these this idea of, you know, bringing in kind of a fractional management role, and I say small business, but this applies even for larger organizations. You know, we've talked to a number of folks in the oil and gas world where they're a part of one of the, you know, major organizations. Not going to throw any names here, but they've got several field offices, and those field offices may only have 4 or 5 folks operating at them. These same concepts apply there as well. Those offices are, for all intents and purposes, just a small business. I mean, it really is. So
I was going to say, well, to that, if somebody who worked for a company that was like that, you're correct. We tend to think of if a company, it's a super major or well-known big company, that everywhere that company exists, they have the same resources, same competencies, and even the same systems in place. But especially if it's through acquisition or just through basic growth, the odds are that they're not, and that's almost low hanging fruit to a small business to come in there and support that field location or secondary location outside of the main hubs that you can say, hey, we can come in and kind of be a secondary support system to whatever y'all are doing.
Yep, no, I agree. What are some differences that y'all have seen in the weight that like an ISO 9001 or an API stand or certification carries when you go through these supplier approvals? We've seen the difference here. Well, what have y'all seen from that?
Yeah, that's what we look for is, are they ISO certified 1345, 9001, or if we're using a calibration system or a lab or whatever, 1725, looking at that, because then that they've been audited and somebody has looked at them, and that they've got a good quality system in place. Yes, they can still have issues like everyone else, but they're more likely to notice their issues and fix them instead of another group.
Instead of it coming through or even just customer complaints and problems.
Right. So they have a process in place to figure that out and investigate it and fix the problem.
Yeah. Caleb, what you got?
It's kind of a funny analogy, but to me, it's almost like Amazon. You go on there and you're looking for a product. There's a bunch of different products. Like, you're not going to go with the one that has 0 reviews that nobody's ever tried out. It's like, it's almost like that, where you've got these certifications, you've proven your industry, you've proven your processes. So that's telling your customers and potential customers, like, we know what we're doing. We're not just.
No, it really is. I like the Amazon review analogy. That's really good. But that's what it is. It's, to the point of what both of you are saying. Someone else has done the assessment. Yeah. You were talking about risk earlier. This is a way to mitigate your risk. Right. And now, the market has shrunk. I mean, the market for services is half what it was a year ago. It's not nothing because the world didn't completely stop, although it may have felt like it at some points in time. But those few providers that are out there, the supply chain is still large, even though what they need is still small. So talk about a little bit of risk perspective here.
Well, I think one of the risk perspectives that we need to look at, if you are that small company that's able to go and service a big company, there's other standards that are coming, and it's a little bit back to the world of ESG. There's going to be requirements, and this is part of that forward thinking and part of that pivot. Is a typical metrics we're used to seeing in my experience around manufacturing and in big companies and machine shops is usually data-driven, measurement-driven, very, very precise, and you're actually looking at something that you can touch.
Yes.
You bring in the ESG standards from a quality standard. I think there's and I don't know if you've seen it, I'd be curious, we talked about it a little bit, but those metrics, that data that's going to be needed, it's going to be measuring things like diversity and inclusion. It's going to be measuring, how well you pay your employees. It's going to be measuring what your carbon emissions are and things of that nature, what your footprint looks like. Well, those are measurable data points. And that responsibility is going to go beyond just the big companies who have room for it.
Right.
And if you're going to want to do business with them,
right,
how are you going to be able to answer those questions when they come back and ask you? Because they're going to be held liable by somebody somewhere, whether it's the public or investors or somebody else, the board, everybody else, that they want to make sure that the entire chain that they're connected with is adhering to those things as well. Right. Because that's the same issue, back to the quality, your quality plans, because even in the product, it's the same difference. Yeah. Just now we're highlighting more of the human element than the product and service element.
I agree. We talk on the podcast often is so much of the ISO 9001 standard is really, it's about the culture. I mean, if you actually sit down and read the standard, very little of the ISO 9001 standard is directly centered around product and service quality directly. It's centered around building the organization, the structure, and the systems that are necessary to provide that product, service, and quality. In the 2015 edition of the standard, they threw the idea of interested parties out. And this is one of the things that everyone's kind of like, what in the world's an interested party? But we're kind of seeing more and more now, which is why I had fun with the podcast we did talking about ESG, this is the intersection of those two. Because these, the world's changed. Folks care a lot more about what your organization does and why you do it and how you go about doing it. And these things have to be focused on. So,
yes.
So but it is. It's like the Made in America. I guess that's probably the closest to this that we've ever really had to worry about. And you've got some folks who simply, and I commend you, they just simply won't buy something if it doesn't have that Made in America sticker on the back. But to put that Made in America sticker on there, that has certain requirements of how far down that supply chain everything was sourced and made here in America. So not only did this supplier do it, but the folks that they purchased from did as well. And, I'm what they call an elder millennial. So I can tell you that we are now the ones that are stepping in to run most of the management positions that, previously were a different generation. And millennials, like it or not, we care about what people care about. And it is a change that's happening. And to your point earlier about turning the elephant, if you've got an organization with even just a few hundred people, which still is technically considered a small business, changing that direction and getting everyone lined up with the same ideas is difficult. But if you're a mom and pop shop, you've got 50, maybe 100 employees or even less. It's really easy to rally people around the cause, and this cause can be a valuable sales tool.
Yeah. I think the key to that though is going to be the history of that company. Mm-hmm. What baggage, and I don't mean to say it that way, but just whatever traditions, I guess you'd say, they're bringing. Yep. So I think there's a little bit different couple ways to approach that. If it's an existing business that has 30 years of history, there's going to be a little bit of a different approach to get them to pivot that versus it's just 3-4 people in a dream.
Right.
That's a different opportunity to basically get them to invest. And so I think it's recognizing how you approach that, because if you approach both the same way, you're going to one will probably work and one probably won't.
Yeah. No, I agree. So what are some other things that y'all seen that are some opportunities for folks here in the next year as a small business? Again, we've got a lower market. We've got less goods and services going around, less demand. So it all sounds pretty pessimistic and scary. But then we have, the advent of so many information technology tools. People can do work quicker, faster, cheaper than ever before. Smaller businesses can pivot and run circles around larger organizations. I think we all saw in the beginning, that companies like Amazon, which sometimes gets a bad reputation out there for taking up so much of the business. Yeah. But I think we're going to find that this is a new renaissance for small business like we saw in the late 90s.
Prices have gone way down. I mean, as far as goods go and services and everything, because you can bash on them, but I mean, because of what they do, it's now very cheap and accessible to buy pretty much whatever you want. So
I agree.
Well, usually small businesses can quickly turn and create a system and move forward. Usually the larger companies, they take longer to create the processes. So they can quickly turn on a dime, change everything, because they're trying to survive. Yeah. So they're trying to make their processes, faster, sleeker, whatever you want to call it, and get their products out there quicker so that way they can sell more. That's their whole purpose.
I had a great conversation with someone yesterday, just prospect, just someone we're talking to. And I was asking, what do y'all do in the last 12 months? How are you getting the quality management system implemented? Because they're still probably maybe 6 months away from being ready to go for certification. And, it sounds like they're really doing a lot of good. And he says, well, Kyle, here's a few things that I've done. And he said, for one, I check out, like your podcast. He said, I've actually got some of the folks on our team listening to it because it's good information. So that was fun to hear. And then he said, the second thing is, and this goes to your point, is he's like, there's no shortage of good case studies on ASQ. He said, I'll spend days just reading through all of these case studies, what other folks have done. And again, these are opportunities that really didn't exist 10 years ago. I remember I had a job doing help desk work in the early 2000s, which sounds like long ago now, but and I remember telling them, well, what do I do when I don't have any work? They said, well, find a white paper. I was like, what the heck is white paper? And you just didn't have access to the same resource you got now.
I read the pink sheets, gold sheets, anything that came from FDA, and now I'm on their website, and they send me everything, their updates. Same thing with the European Union stuff, anything that's happening over there, because you never know where you're going to get into, and I need to know because the U.S. may adopt it, or we maybe start selling overseas. You just never know. So just keeping abreast of what's happening in the regulatory and quality world.
Yeah, and it's not that terribly hard to jump into the middle of it. Like, Caleb, you came from this background of weld inspection work and quality control. And what have you been working on the last 6 months?
Oh, improvements. Helping companies improve. That's what we do. Is we try and make the work quicker, more efficient. So that's what we've been trying to do is find companies that are willing to get out of their comfort zone. And I don't want to. It's not taking a risk, but changing. That way, trying to automate the system or.
But I think you hit the key is that you have to get out of the comfort zone.
Yeah.
The world has fundamentally changed the way that we're going to do business. I mean,
change with it.
Yeah, I hate the term new normal, but like we are moving into a new normal, and we have to adjust. Which again, that's so much what you guys work with on your podcast.
Yeah, we do. It's a big part of that evolution. But I also want to. There's part of this small business narrative that I definitely want to point out. And I don't think we should be afraid to be a small business as well, if you are one. And what I mean by that is we tend to look at Amazon or Microsoft or whoever as this goal. And yet I think part of the pandemic has taught us that if you're okay with wherever you are in that role, if you're not going to ever be, if you're part of that 15% of the Amazon shipping part that isn't, that market's, it seems like, market share, you need to be more, it needs to be bigger.
Right.
Maybe part of the lesson is the ability to just be okay with where you're at in that market and stay true to what you're doing and just be okay with it.
No, I completely agree. So let's just kind of do then a quick recap here of what we're looking at. So, obviously we know how the world has changed. We know how terrible things have gotten. So many businesses are really suffering and struggling. But at the same time, we know that small business can pivot. You can change, you can make improvements much more rapidly, much more quickly than before. But there's a fear with making those changes. You kind of get a little squirrely with it, right? So, to Melissa's point earlier, it's like this is really where the documentation comes into play. If you're making a change, document it in a corrective action or in some sort of a form of, we made this change on this date. These are the thoughts we had before we made it and what we expected. And then set yourself a date on the calendar to review. Did we get the increased sales we expected? Did we get the decrease in customer complaints we expected? Did we get the results we expected? It's simple stuff. It's absolutely fundamental to quality management. And these are the things that are gonna help us. Caleb pointed out, the idea of getting out of your comfort zone here. It's absolutely critical. You have to be willing to do something new. And then information technology. This is one where I think it can get a little scary sometimes, though, because there's no shortage of tools out there. There's absolutely no shortage of tools. And for a computer geek like me, that can be a problem, right? Because I always see the next shiny option out there. But at some point in time, you simply have to say, this is what we're going to use for the next 6 months, and we'll reevaluate that.
Yeah.
But, again, the evaluation, you need to document it. You need to document that you did it.
You touched on the fact that, there's no shortage of tools out there, but there's, also no shortage of, I don't want to use like the dreaded air quotes, information as well. And one of the things that I find is there's just so much, and then you start to dig into it and you're like, that's not really anything, it grabbed my attention. But I think that also finding a good source of information and a good, person that you trust is imperative if you're going to take a step in a certain direction that you may be uncertain about.
And again, we've got more opportunities for businesses to do that now than we would have had a year and a half ago, because you do have so many professionals that are out of work or looking for the next idea. And there's no reason that they couldn't help support 3 or 4 different organizations, probably earn a better living than they were earning before, and add more value back into the economy and the marketplace than they ever could have before either. Before we get finished up here, any final thoughts from anyone else? You want to?
Yeah, sure. So I think what I keep hearing you say is to be able to make those decisions to begin with. I think it goes back to what you're talking about. Having data, quality data to make that decision from, not just going off of, I read something on LinkedIn or I watched one YouTube video and now I'm inspired to go take on the world. I know there's nothing wrong with kind of that beginning point.
Right.
But I think going back to the diligence part of what do we know? What can we put our finger on, like you said? And then I think in terms of evaluating, I don't want to break it down in just the two areas, but I'd say what hasn't changed or what's always going to be important, right? You're going to need to have, measured metrics, measure something. So now the medium by how that happens may change,
right?
But some of these fundamental aspects aren't going to go anywhere. So maybe it's to regroup and pivot, but to focus on something that you think is specific. But I think there's also a couple other areas you can go into, and one of them might be, there may be this wild card. Maybe it is time to look at unicorns and rainbows and say, what looking at what's happening now, is this potential there from a transition? Right. Still using qualitative data, still in that same frame, but saying we're going to take this risk and maybe it's a little bit different than this one, but we're going to go ahead and do that. So I think it's part of it is being adventurous and pivoting, but also being true to those natures around let's make a sound decision based on what we know.
No, I agree. And that's, you go back to the quality management principles, is evidence-based decision making. I mean, it's just right there in the absolute foundation of everything we have here. But, you talk about maybe kind of going after some of these other squirrely topics, which is, look, trust me, I know it's very easy to see, shiny opportunities out there. Maybe we want to go after this and do that. But you do have to keep it focused. And really, I think the best way of keeping that focused is to know why you exist. Why does your organization exist? What is the core that you're doing? And again, I love what you said about the small business. It's like, it's okay to be a small business. You can serve a niche goal, and you've got a certain way and angle that you approach it. And it's just, we're going to have someone on the podcast soon to talk about the value of mission statements and quality policies. And, I can say from having done a number of ISO audits that folks usually just gloss right over that quality policy. Like, yes, we have it. It technically hits all of the requirements of the standard. And as an ISO auditor, I just kind of sail on by. But I think for organizations that really want to not just survive this pandemic and this economic turndown, but really want to thrive as it continues, they really have to be focused on those their mission, on their policy, and the documentation.
Right. And going to electronic version, now that we're all, working from home, same thing. If you want to be able to share, your documents and things like that, that's the best place to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, 'cause there's a lot of companies that I worked for as well back in the day where, everything was paper. So how do you do that now that everybody's working from home? You can't share it and here, sign it. You can't do that because you're not in the office. So, those are now the best tools to be using. So if you're going to look at, here's what happened to Kappa and be able to bring everybody into it, what the investigation is, all that documentation can be out there so everybody can view it. So when you're looking at metrics, you're trying to figure out, well, what happened, why, is it recurring? All those things, all that information is out there. So you can pull it up. Anybody can see it.
Yep.
You can, move forward, correct it, whatever.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Caleb, any final thoughts here?
No, I mean, we're here to help.
So, no, this is a lot of fun. So again, this is kind of our first time doing one of these live stream events. So, same as everything else, we're kind of figuring it out. We documented what we were going to do, and now we'll go back and reevaluate how well did this work.
Yeah.
We're going to follow our own advice there. Hey, from our small audience that we have here, any comments or questions from you guys, thoughts or anything you want to know about? No? All right, fine. So don't put people on the spot. Hey, well, I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here and to do this with us. I'm looking forward to doing some more events like this, and again, just kind of keep figuring this out as we go. But I just want to leave with one final thought is I am truly, absolutely hopeful and very optimistic for the future of small business in this economy. I really think this is the gold mine that existed at the time of the .com boom, but it's not a bubble that's going to burst. This is the real deal. Small businesses, folks that care and are passionate about what they do, really have an opportunity to make a difference in the world, and I'm just looking forward to being a part of it. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.